Big news just in time for the holidays. For a limited time, switch to Sprint and get your 3rd, 4th, and 5th lines free. That's unlimited for just $20 per month per line for 5 lines. Visit a Sprint store, sprint.com/unlimited, or call 800-SPRINT-1. Make the switch to Sprint Unlimited and start saving a ton of money with Sprint.
After 1/31/2020, pay $60 a month for line 1, $40 a month for line 2, and $20 a month for lines 3 through 5 with auto pay. Offer coverage not available everywhere. Requires new lines of service subject to credit and $30 activation fee. Excludes taxes, fees, and roaming speed. Maximum use rules and restrictions apply.
Blog Talk Radio.
Alternative facts.
The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. At 12:07 a.m. Eastern Daylight Time, numerous unidentified objects of unknown intent and unknown origin were detected at high altitudes over multiple locations of Earth's outer space by the National Radio Astronomy Observatory, and these objects are presumed to be some form of controlled aircraft. It is not known if more of these aircraft will arrive, or if they will attempt entering Earth's atmosphere. United States citizens are encouraged to monitor local media outlets, as more updates will follow as information becomes available. The following message is transmitted at the request of the United States government. Attacks by the undead have been reported in several states across the country. The dead are rising from their graves and are attacking the human race. At this time, it's expected that more attacks of this nature will occur in several other states in the next few hours. The intent behind their attack is unknown at this time. He has been observed that a bike or exchange of fluids is a method of transmission. This is an extremely dangerous situation if they crave the taste of human flesh. It is not known whether this event will last for hours, days, or even longer. Stay calm, as authorities have been dispatched to deal with these creatures. An all-clear siren will be sounded when this situation is under control. Pacific Standard Time, nor is detected a long-range nuclear missile launcher. This missile is believed to be headed in the direction of all residents within a 400-mile radius of this area should seek a fallout shelter immediately.
Welcome to Within the Chaos with your host, Rodney the Viking Shortridge, co-host, Melinda the Raven Jackson. Want to give a big old shout out to the Facebook paranormal groups that allow us to post our shows on their pages and helping us to get the word out about all of our guests. Also, a shout out to the Connor sisters. Hats off to Misty and Ashley. They are the founders of SOS Sisters of Salem Paranormal Research Society and host of their podcast, Paranormal Party. You can find them on Facebook under Paranormal Party. If anyone would like to speak to Black Diamond Paranormal Society, BDPS, to discuss your paranormal questions or issues, go to our website at blackdiamondps.org or email blackdiamondps@yahoo.com. As always, our services are free.
Good evening, everyone, and thank you for joining us tonight. You can listen in by calling 516-387-1922, or you can go to the Vibe Radio Network website at blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. For deep within the heart of the Appalachian Mountains, I'd like to welcome everyone and thank you for listening to Within the Chaos. My name is Rodney Shortridge, and I'll be your host tonight, along with my beautiful raven, Melinda Jackson. First off, I'd like to give a shout-out to my cousins up in Ohio, Jennifer and Joe Shortridge of 222 Paranormal. If you get a chance, check out their talk show. You can find them on Facebook under 222 Paranormal.
Have your devices just randomly stopped working? Are you having IT trouble? Not to worry, Mead's PC Repair Shop can help. We also offer IT support too, including website hosting. We are now also offering full event management services. To find out more, contact our friendly customer service team who will gladly help in any situation. Just call 276-880-8900, or if you prefer, you can stop by our shop at 1089 St. Clair Street, Oakwood, Virginia, 24631 by appointment only, or by visiting the website at meadspcshop.com for more information. Thank you.
Well, howdy, everybody. I'm sorry about last week's show that our guest, I could hear him, but he couldn't hear me. We had tech problems, and we hadn't had none in a while, so I hope everybody forgives me, but we'll have Mr. Graham on next month. So, I'll just let everybody know, once again, tonight on our Christmas special show, our guest is Varla Ventura. Varla is author of Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor, Ghost Seances, and Tales of True Hauntings that came out this past June. She's also the author of 5 other books on the spooky stuff: Banshees, Werewolves, Vampires, and Other Creatures of the Night, The Book of the Bizarre, Among the Mermaids, Beyond Bizarre and Fairy Tales, Pukas, and Changelings. She can often be found lurking about in the deep, dark woods and lakes of Minnesota on the hunt for beastly things and hidden history. You can visit her online at www.varlaventura.net. This makes the 3rd time we've had her on, and she's going to help us talk a little bit about Christmas and all that good shit. Because I know some people don't understand where Christmas comes from, and hopefully she can give us some insight. Mm-hmm. And we got Melinda back with us tonight. Last week she was sick, but since I couldn't tell everybody that because nobody could hear me, how you feel tonight?
I feel a lot better, thank you.
That's good. You ready to dig in this?
I'm ready. I got my sleeves rolled up and heels dug in.
All right, then. Let's get this party started. Let's see here. I'm pleased to work. Varla, can you hear me?
I sure can. Can you hear me?
Yes, it works.
Woo!
So how you doing?
Miracle.
She's like, oh shit, here we go.
I am doing wonderful. How are you? Happy holidays. Thanks for having me back.
Oh, thank you for coming back, and happy holidays to you too. Oh, I've enjoyed having you on. You're going to be a regular. I can see that right now. Well, so Varla, we'll just dive right into this. You know, again, I'll let you tell people that may not have listened to past shows. You know, tell us a little bit about yourself before we get into this Christmas stuff.
Sure. Okay. Well, I am an author and a scholar of freaky things. A supernaturalist by nature. I love folklore, strange facts, hidden history, sort of the magic and lore behind, everyday things that we might consider common or ordinary. I'm fascinated by all kinds of magical creatures and I love a good ghost story. So those are all that's my background, my interests. I've been writing for a number of years now. I have 6 books on these topics that I mentioned published, the most recent one, as you mentioned earlier. And my bio is called Varla Ventura's Paranormal Parlor. And we talked about that, I think, in our first interview, where we just kind of talked about ghosts and the sort of the history of the paranormal and our fascination with the spirit world. So that's my most recent work. And, I just kind of interested in this type of topic since I was pretty young, heavily influenced by a very witchy mom and just sort of an unconventional childhood. So I grew up always being interested and not afraid of things, that we might associate with the dark side of things. I spent a lot of time in cemeteries as a child, a lot of time in cemeteries. We would picnic, we would walk, we would, observe, occasionally visit people we knew, but really it was more about, just kind of reading the headstones and, thinking about who lived there, making up stories of, what their lives were like. And, that's kind of just my gist, I guess. You can find out more about me on my website, varlaventura.net.
That's just laying it down there. That's who I am.
That's right. Deal with it.
Well, seeing how this is our Christmas special, and I want to be. We're going to be asking you questions, about trying to dig into your knowledge and expertise about the holiday season. And I want to start out with where and when did Christmas get started?
Well, it's interesting because we have sort of like the Christmas of today, which is a mix of a lot of different beliefs. Believe it or not, it's not all a purely Christian-based holiday, although the term Christmas, Christmas, does sort of hearken to the origin of the Christmas holiday, that sort of the Christmas story we have been telling our children for the last 100 years or so. But Christmas itself coincides with a lot of other holidays and traditions. Tomorrow is the winter solstice, and this is has always been, this time of year has always been an important time for people because it's sort of the turning point when winter actually starts. In some climates and cultures, that might be a few months, including Minnesota, that might be a few months down the road. But really, in terms of our actual distance from the time when it becomes darkest at like fall equinox, we're sort of going away from that, and now our days will gradually get a teensy bit longer until the darkness starts to fade into spring and then summer. And so because of this, it was such a significant time for crops, for harvest, for, sort of the survival of people. And so around the world, you have traditions that coincide with this time of year. For example, you have, sort of a solstice tradition, a Celtic solstice tradition. In Rome, you have Saturnalia, which was actually held on December 17th and continued through usually the beginning of January, so exactly around this time. And that was a time in which the god of agriculture was celebrated, Saturn, and it was basically a time of, this will shock you when you know that it's, in context of it being ancient Rome, but it was rather hedonistic, and there was a lot of feasting. The Romans, they loved to party down and sort of just, grab life whole hog there. And everything would just kind of be upended, and, it would be a little bit of a chaotic time, but it would be a time of revelry and celebration where people would sort of let go and welcome in, hopefully a good year following. Keeping in mind that, although we are completely dependent on crops today, we're just dependent in a different way. And we don't have that exact, many of us, especially in the United States, don't have that, what I plant in the ground in, March or April is going to feed my family for the rest of the year. So many of us, buy our groceries at the grocery store, and you can get stuff year round. But of course, that was not always the case. And so people who relied so heavily on the seasons and the cycles, it was extremely important to mark the significance of this time. You also had, the Celtic solstice celebration. Again, a time for burning, the Yuletide, a time for burning a log and, the traditional Yule log, and trying to burn away some of the darkness and welcome the light of spring to come. A way of sort of getting through that, the darkest days, when it's getting dark at 3 p.m. or earlier. And of course, this also gives way to sort of the lights on the Christmas tree. In a lot of the Scandinavian and sort of more Nordic and Norse traditions, there were often light offerings, and you would, just as you might burn the Yule log, you would light candles or have a bonfire in the woods, or perhaps even decorate a tree with candles. Now that sounds like a crazy fire hazard to a lot of us, but often it was outside, and you have to consider that these were climates in which, there were evergreen trees that were quite frozen, so the chance of it all catching a flame was a lot lower. But the point being that it was a time for people to sort of celebrate and bring that light in. Now, when, Rome sort of turned to Christianity and then started to move upward and conquer through all of these other parts of Europe and the UK, they brought with them this Catholic tradition, which we've talked about a bit with on the Halloween special, about the sort of overlapping of certain Catholic holidays that would overlap, not coincidentally, with a time that was also significant to the indigenous people in that area. So it might be, a solstice celebration or a Yule celebration. And in the Norse countries, and the Norse celebrated also a Yule celebration. They often paid homage to Odin, who, incidentally, was a long, white-bearded fellow, and his day was right around the solstice, and he was also sort of made offerings to and prayed to and celebrated around this time for protection and good luck in the new year.
Okay.
So that kind of brings us to, that's sort of the, we're funneling toward something more like Christmas that we have today. Of course, there is the Christmas story, the birth of Jesus, and this all coinciding around the same time. And then from that, because here in the United States we have so many different cultures, around this time, many people recognize that there's a significant celebration, and these different cultures have brought different aspects of sort of our modern Christmas idea of giving and giving back and spirit, but these all have their roots in what was important to do, at the time, based on, survival, really.
Okay. Hello, Varla.
Hi, how are you? Are you feeling better?
I'm feeling a lot better. My first question is, who invented the Santa Claus image?
Well, Santa, so you have two different kind of entities. You have Saint Nick and you have Santa Claus. So Santa Claus, Saint Nicholas. That's a story of a man who was sainted, who became the patron saint of children, and was said to have performed all of these miracles, and was sainted and then celebrated around this time of year. His counterpart, which we can talk about later, is Krampus. You know, Krampus is this wonderful, beastly, pagan figure that I just know we all adore. The Santa Claus of today. Now, a lot of countries actually claim Santa Claus as their own. Finland, for example, claims to be the home of Santa Claus. And honestly, if I had to pick a country, that's probably the country I would choose. You know, they're basically in the Arctic Circle. There are a lot of sort of Finnish creatures that hearken themselves to a Santa Claus-like elf. There are many sort of woodland fairy-type creatures that could be described as Santa Claus. But there are many countries that lay claim to the origin of Santa Claus. So today we have sort of this combination of these old school elven sort of magical beings and our Saint Nicholas. And we even call him Saint Nick, who was, as I said, the patron saint of children. And so it became associated with this person who rewarded good behavior and protected children. Today, as we sort of know him, is an evolution of something more pagan that then became sort of roundier and more jolly as time progressed until about the Victorian era. And so prior to, I think it was probably the mid-1800s or so, Santa Claus was often depicted in other colors, dark, deep green, sometimes dark blue. Often in the Scandinavian countries, he would wear a beautiful royal blue. And these colors all had associations with different deities, or the colors represented something. It was about the sort of the Victorian era, especially when Santa Claus started being depicted in more red, like you would see him in red and white. And there was a very famous artist named Thomas Nash, who was drew all these wonderful images that we kind of know today. We associate with that sort of like classic Victorian Santa, and he kind of drew up the outfit. But in my research into fairy and folklore, I have found a lot of descriptions of creatures, including leprechauns, whose outfit is very similar to Santa Claus. In fact, leprechauns were not always associated with green. They were associated with red, and they would wear red, and they loved fabrics, and they were tinkerers, and they had a little workbench in the middle of the forest. So here's a little hint of a Santa. There are also these sort of gnome-like creatures in parts of Sweden and Norway, and in a bit in Finland as well. You have these little creatures called tomtens or nisi, and they are these sort of bearded gnome-like guys with red pointy hats or green pointy hats, and they're thought to be woodland spirits. Sometimes they are thought to be of stone, and they bring good luck, and you put them out on your porch, and they attract good luck. Sometimes in Germany, you put out a shoe next to your little guy, and you'll get little treasures inside the shoe. So you have these sort of tiny little Santa-like creatures all around the world, and they gradually become associated with the sort of more modern Santa. At some point, ingenious parents realized that the Santa could be used as a means to encourage good behavior, especially during a time when everybody was stuck inside. So there became this kind of reward system. And I don't know exactly when that started. It probably started from day one, really, because I've heard, many modern inventions of elves and other creatures that keep children in line. So ultimately, Santa Claus is sort of this global creature that has become has a certain iconic image to us here in the United States, especially because of those drawings from the mid-1800s by Thomas Nast. But he has been depicted in many different ways and across time. But as we call him today, Santa Claus or Saint Nick, he's sort of the evolution of these gnome meets saint meets sort of Victorian sensibility.
Okay. Well, where did the story of Santa's reindeer come from, and when did Rudolph become so famous?
That's so interesting. I actually just heard this really cool story the other day about the Rudolph the Red-Nosed Reindeer, the origins of that. And so, but just to answer the first part, reindeer, again, they are associated with strength and sustenance, especially in Lapland, where there are reindeer, where, again, the Finns will claim that Santa comes from. So you have just this, again, a creature that is a horned god or a horned creature that is associated with a ritual that is trying to ensure the safety and well-being and health and wealth and luck of the entire tribe or village or family. And so these are, and also they're around all winter. They don't hibernate. You can find them, and of course they were hunted for sustenance in the winter and thought to be very powerful. You also have the Yule goat as a strong association. Goats are, again, we get into the goat-footed god, where you have this association of a pagan god who represents all that is sort of unhinged and chaotic in nature, that is offered, that is made offerings to in order to sort of ensure that protection and harness that nature to a certain extent. So it makes sense that a magical being like Santa would be able to commune with reindeer, and the whole idea that he could transport. Now, once upon a time, you weren't out on Christmas Eve because it was a very a time when the veil is very, very thin between this world and the other world. And so you were vulnerable. And if you weren't careful, you might go out and encounter witches and trolls riding brooms and swooping through the night and all manner of frightening beasts out there. So, the idea that a magical guy, basically, a magical being could command these reindeer and get them to fly, it's kind of along the lines of witches flying on brooms. There were probably some misinterpretations and some substances involved in order to have that perception. But, and now I forgot, the second part of the question was about Rudolph, right?
Yes.
Yeah. So I'll plug another a wonderful podcast that I just stumbled upon recently, and it's called Christmas Past. And there's a number of episodes on there. I haven't listened to them all. I just found out about it like 2 days ago, and it's been out for a couple years. And basically what the guy does are short little 15-minute segments or so, and he takes a common Christmas legend. This is just only specific to Christmas, and he explains it to you, like what history, how it evolved. And so I listened to the one about Rudolph because, I thought, well, that'd be interesting. I don't really know the backstory there. I mean, I know it was a children's book, and then it became a movie, and then, it's a famous song and everything. But it turns out that I believe it was Montgomery Ward commissioned this fellow, I'd have to look his name up, basically they decided that they wanted to have a publication. They wanted a children's story. And so they asked this man who was a writer at the time, they asked him to write this story about Rudolph. And he wrote out this original story, and then it was published by Montgomery Ward, and it was sort of meant to be like a Christmas supplement, like a little pamphlet, a little something you could hand out. It was a way to get people to come into the stores. Now, this is in the I would have to look up what year this actually happened, but I would say it was probably the 20s or the 30s, and they're trying to entice people to come into the store and shop. And so he writes this book, and it becomes wildly popular, like far beyond what anybody thought could be. Certainly Montgomery Ward didn't think that's how it was going to go down. So, but the thing is he doesn't actually have the rights to this story. He wrote it basically as like a work for hire by Montgomery Ward. I'm just going to look up his name so I get it right. And it becomes wildly popular. But he doesn't make a dime off of it. And so, time goes by, and it's still incredibly popular. And then eventually, after a number of years, it's they decide that they're done with it. And the kind of remarkable thing about it at this point is that this guy, that Montgomery Ward basically gives over the rights back to the author who wrote it originally. So you can have it. You can have it. It was 1939 is when it was written, and the guy's his last name was May, and I'm trying to remember his first name. Don't know it.
Robert,
It'll come to
I
me.
think Robert May.
That sounds right. Full, rhyming poem about Rudolph. And Montgomery Ward has all the success with it, and then for years it's quite popular. And then eventually they decide that they're kind of done with it. So they pass it on to, they pass the rights back to May. And they're like, yeah, you can have it. You can have the rights. We're done with it. Well, he's not quite sure what to do with it, except for it turns out that his brother-in-law is a guy named Johnny Marks. And Johnny Marks is a songwriter. And this is like, late 40s. And the books, all the children have grown up and know this story now, or 10 years have passed since it's been out. And he writes this story. He tells his brother-in-law, and together they turn this book into a song, which then Gene Autry records, and that's the version that the first version many of us ever heard. And so it's kind of a great story because May never got any royalties from the book, but he got all of these royalties from the song, and was actually, died a fairly wealthy man and became quite famous and was acknowledged for having written it. So it's kind of this thing that just you never hear stories like that. You always hear the sort of sad story of how this person wrote something and they never got the credit that they deserved, and they died a pauper. But this is like quite the opposite. He basically didn't give up on this work that he had done, and when he received it back, he did something new and innovative with it, and so he just made Rudolph up. He just made up the whole Red Ranger. It was all from the creative mind of a poet and a writer, and then it has this great, very Christmas cheerful kind of backstory to it.
Well, what I've read and researched about Rudolph is also that Montgomery Ward was really worried about making his nose red, because at the time that associated with alcoholism.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
I never read that. That's funny. Yeah.
I thought that was really interesting when I found that out.
Sense. Well, yeah, I mean, and I don't really know what their reasons were to actually sort of discard it and give it back to May, but just that's a little unclear. Like what happened? It just wasn't cost effective to print it anymore. Sales had waned, as happens with, I can attest to that, as happens with books quite frequently. You get a nice push in the beginning, and then maybe you get lucky and you get on like Oprah's pick list or something, and you get a little bit of a longer shelf life, and then eventually you're in the bargain bin at the thrift store. So
Yeah.
Okay, my next question is, why do people get offended by the spelling of Christmas with an X? And when did the X in Christmas start?
that I have no idea. I think I have an idea of why people get offended by it. Doesn't offend me, and I find it funny that people would be offended by that. But I'm not really sure why, how Christmas became the X. Do you know?
Well, from what I understand about the X, it has to do with the Roman word that's similar to Christ, and they started that a long time ago. And from what I understand, Christians get offended of it because they think it's taking Christ out of Christmas, but actually
it's the same thing.
It's the same thing. They just
Putting
don't.
It back in.
They just don't understand it.
Oh,
That's
right.
why they've just shortened the word down a little bit.
They're very visual creatures.
Yeah, the Romans were cool. Cool, but weird. They did too much fucking everything. They too weird, man. Listen to that giggle.
I know.
That's one of those evil giggles. Like, yeah, I know.
Okay. Was Jesus born on Christmas Day? And if not, why do Christians and many other people celebrate his birthday on the 25th?
I have no idea what day Jesus was born. I personally don't even believe that Jesus existed. Shocking. All these people are going to hang up right now. But I have some, and I kind of touched on this just a few minutes ago, that I think this particular day was chosen very specifically in order to convert people to Christianity, people who celebrated the solstice, people who celebrated Yule, which was there. I mean, it's the same damn week. I mean, it's, there's just no way that's an accident. And nope. I think that's, it was a way of, and that is actually a very, if you want to convert somebody, it's actually what you do is you lay out a big feast, you put a big fire in the hearth, and you tell them that, they're going to get in trouble if they don't come. And, most people are going to come. They'll come for the free food. Maybe they'll come for the coffee. They might come for the fear, but they're going to come. And keep in mind also that, there are, just like in any group of people, you have people who were, devout Celts, and then you had people who were just sort of like doing their own thing, and they were open to other ideas. And some of the ideas that were preached and were talked about make a lot of sense. They made a lot of sense to the pagans. They make a lot of sense today. The idea that you can be redeemed, the idea that you can operate on behalf of a deity and a divine entity. The idea that, you can care for others and that there's, a level of humanity there. So although I don't believe in, Christmas as the birth of Jesus, I do believe in a lot of the principles of Christianity. They make sense. And I can see how somebody who operates in that way anyway would just kind of, maybe they would get something from a service. Maybe they would, just in time accept it because, some people just accept and move on because it's not important to them to be declared one thing or another. They just are more interested in the survival of their family. So maybe they're going to just say whatever, gets them the lowest taxes or whatever the situation was. So I don't mean to say that I think it's, a horrific holiday for that reason, but I mean, it's a good tactic to convert people to basically put aspects of their own religious practices directly into your religious practice. And so then it's identifiable.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. What can you tell us about the three kings that came to see baby Jesus?
Again, this is just not my area of expertise. I have as little to do with Christianity as possible. I really don't.
I know the
feeling. Hope I'm not disappointing too much, but I really don't. I'm not a scholar. I, sped read the Bible one time just to see how many times it mentioned women. I mean, honestly, I'm not a great scholar of Christianity, so I don't feel like I can really comment or, speculate on who the three kings were. However, I do think the idea of bringing gifts and offerings, that is part of the Christmas tradition that we practice today with gift giving. Again, that also has its own sort of pagan origins of making offerings and giving alms to the poor and, kind of giving things like little house brownies and elves that thrived this time of year also required a saucer of milk and a plate of cookies or cakes. So, that's kind of, I think, where we get the Santa Claus offering. I think it comes from the fairy kingdom, not from Christianity. But, sorry, I don't really know anything about the three kings. There were these three dudes. They were probably really smart. They walked a lot. I don't know.
Well, maybe, okay, I'll go with a sidestep question in with this. Do you think it's true that suicides spike during the Christmas season?
Yes, absolutely. I do think that's true. I think certainly feelings of loneliness and disparity spike during this time of year. And I think it's for a variety of reasons. I mean, for one thing, it's dark and we don't get as much vitamin D. And that can lead to, depression and, sort of some people are susceptible to seasonal affective disorder. Other people, there's just so much pressure. There's so much pressure to give a gift to everybody. There's so much pressure to, decorate your house just so and make everything just perfectly smelling like pine fresh gingerbread or whatever this time of year. So there's a lot of pressure. There's a lot of financial pressure on people. And there's a lot of feelings of loneliness because it's supposed to be this time of great cheer and it's supposed to be this, sort of hallmark image of a holiday. And sometimes, it's just another shitty day and people are trying to get through it. And so I do think that there's always a spike in suicide or thoughts of suicide this time of year because, it's hard to burn brightly against looming darkness. And that's metaphorical and also true. We also miss people a lot more this time of year than we do maybe when we're out on the lake in the middle of, it's a time of deep reflection, and it can be very, very difficult if you are really, for many people, this time of year is about the empty seat at the table, not what you're going to unwrap from under the tree. And so it's important. I'm not sure why exactly you asked that, but I do think it's an important, thing for us all to remember as if we're nestled cozy in our beds, to think of people who are struggling this time and who are really missing, maybe they're living people, but maybe they're loved ones who've gone beyond, and they, feel especially far away or alone. Those are the people that we should be lighting the candles for, not the dude in the white robe who isn't Santa.
Well, I agree with you. And,
his name starts with J.
The reason why I asked the question is because of everything you just said, and it plays a huge part in the holidays where, people, I know they're thinking of their families, they're thinking of themselves and so forth, but there's a lot of people out there that have depression and have mental illness that are alone and feel isolated and trapped and don't have no one to turn to. And, it should be a holiday, or supposed to be a holiday, of caring and giving, and that's to everyone, and that should be year round.
I agree. Yes, and I do think it's just it's a time that we spend so much time thinking about the decorations and the gifts and the cookies and all of these things, and there's nothing wrong with those things, but we forget about just taking that time to really sort of reflect and, pay honor to somebody who's passed away or, who's estranged from us. It should be a time of great love and forgiveness. And I feel that there's a lot of similarities between sort of, the origins of Halloween and making offerings to the dead. And I feel that there could be more of that at Christmas time, and in a totally not creepy way, in a very beautiful and very honorable way. We like to just shove it all away and shove it, down inside and put a shiny bow on it so that we don't have to look at it all the time. And I totally get that, and I do that myself. I definitely shove things out of the way and just try and look at the shiny things sometimes because it can be overwhelming. But I do think it's important to, people are alone and they are missing. I mean, there are people that I miss greatly, that I miss a lot at this time of year, and some who have passed away pretty close to this date. So I think it's always nice to do something. It will make you feel better to remember them. To light a candle to their picture or make their favorite food and, just remember someone who was close to them.
I agree.
Is there such a thing as a war on Christmas?
I mean, I'm not sure if that's, it's sort of like a modern term, I guess. Do you think people are against the commercialism of it in that sense, a war, or a war in the Christian sense, in the Christian version of it?
I would say both.
Yeah.
Well, then, hell yeah, there's a war. The pagans are going to win.
Yes, we are.
Okay, then my next question is, what did the Puritans have to do with Christmas?
Wow, these are really intense questions.
Sorry.
Well, Puritans. Puritans certainly were strict, and they didn't like celebrations that brought out any level of wild abandonment, even if it was a lock of a bit of a curl dangling down behind your ear. So I believe that there was a time when no Christmas was allowed, and this was especially during the sort of the height of our, and perhaps even the beginning of our truly commercial obsession with Christmas. So we're talking like late Victorian era, a time when we're like getting ready to really kind of bring out the commercial elements. But I don't know if the Puritan colonists really even allowed Christmas. It was my understanding that they banned all manner of celebrations because it wasn't pure enough. So I think they tried to ruin it.
Yeah, they were hard-nosed dicks. I would not want to live with those people. Oh, Lord. They would
Yeah,
burn me
I mean, they definitely, I wonder if I've thought before about the idea of sort of the Grinch, did he sort of, what was that sort of a commentary on this, just time in history when any chance of, I mean, gosh, what a dark time. And first of all, you're living in this new country. You've totally just like trashed the health of and well-being of the indigenous people. So they're haunting you. And you're living in like muck and mire. You've got no support from really any country, and it's cold and you're grumpy. And, on top of all of that, you basically can't even have sex. It's like, oh my God, that must have just been like the most horrible time. No wonder they just started accusing people of being witches. Yeah, they had nothing else to do. It's just like bored. Madness ensued. They were bored.
Yeah, we're bored and
misinformed, and spoil sports.
Yeah. Well, during World War II, did Hitler remove Christmas from Germany?
Hitler I believe he removed any kind of religious holiday, and at that time, Christmas was considered I suppose it still is. Not in my household, but okay. I think that he banned any kind of religious service. So if I remember, there weren't even, they didn't celebrate anything. There was no Easter. There was no Christmas. There was no Halloween. He didn't want people believing in anything that other than his own doctrine. So, and you can imagine that actually would jeopardize him, because the idea that, should somebody have the spark of, pure kindness, then they might be onto him. And, he just really, anytime, it's just similar to the Puritans, right? It's just like, oh, nope, these people are starting to get out of control. We have to keep them in line. So we're going to take all the fun away. And then as soon as they pout about it, we'll punish them. So it'll be even less fun. And they can go back and toil in the fields, or in this case, toil as soldiers.
How does the Japanese celebrate Christmas?
Oh, that's a good question. I'm not that familiar with Japanese Christmas traditions. I know that there's like a few modern versions where there's like, certain food that's made this time of year. A lot of those foods and celebrations have kind of a merging of a sort of the English culture merging with the Japanese culture, but I'm not terribly familiar. When I lived in San Francisco, there were around this time there were always certain celebrations amongst the at like Japantown, and there would be these beautiful little like fruity cakes and things like that. But I don't really know if there's like modern Japan Christmas is similar to how we experience it, but I think there are probably some traditional celebrations that took place pre-Christmas in Japan that I'm just not that familiar with. I feel like I'm saying that a lot, but I'm sorry, I don't know anything about Christianity, like Bible stuff. I don't know the Bible.
Hey, that's fine. If we have something, that's, dealing with, because a lot of it, we do have a lot of Christian related stuff, but it also goes into the paganism and other things.
Yeah, I mean, I guess that's the only thing I would say about, like, I think with Japan we have a very similar kind of modern Christmas. Definitely came around during World War II when there were a lot of American soldiers in occupying Japan and introducing some Christmas traditions, usually revolving around sweets. But, Christianity, I mean, the Christianity was in Japan for, hundreds of years before that, but it wasn't really such a widespread holiday, I don't think, until it became a little bit more common during the World War II especially.
Well, the reason why we brought up the Japanese celebration of Christmas is because researching for these, questions about Christmas, I found out that the Japanese on Christmas Day, their big meal is KFC. They have to order within 2 months to get their Christmas chicken for Christmas Day. And I was I'm like, wow, you go KFC. I said, damn.
Yeah, that's kind of gross, I guess.
Hey, don't make knock at KFC. I like KFC. I'd celebrate it a year around. I don't know why they just wait till Christmas. The hell for.
I'll celebrate the KFC.
Yeah, I'd be like, Merry Christmas to me and the Japanese.
You can start your own tradition.
That's right.
Okay. What is mistletoe, and what was the purpose of it?
So mistletoe is actually a semi-parasitic plant that has a lot of people have heard that it's a fungus or a parasite, but it's actually called like a semi-parasite or a hemiparasite, meaning that it is parasitic. It feeds off of its host plant, but it actually gets the host plant gets something as well. So it has a bit of a symbiotic relationship. And it's traditionally, now it's interesting because where I grew up in California, we have a lot of beautiful old oak trees, and mistletoe grows, in big chunks on these trees. I mean, you can climb up and pull it down. However, here where I live, and many people that I know from the Midwest or parts of sort of like middle Canada or even parts of the East Coast are like, what? No, that doesn't grow here. We don't have that here. And it doesn't grow here because it has this relationship with certain kinds of plants, certain kinds of trees, oak trees typically. So the origin of sort of the idea behind mistletoe and why we kiss under it, there's a few ideas behind that. Probably the one most on the money, I think, is that the Romans believed that mistletoe itself held a divine male essence. The Druids believed that that mistletoe grew on the most sacred oak trees, and so it was actually a sign that that oak tree had even more magical powers. The Norse actually believed that mistletoe could actually resurrect the dead. So there's a lot of different mythology around mistletoe. Today we have the idea of sort of kissing under that ball of mistletoe, and that became very popular in the Victorian era when, it was thought that, of course, you kiss under the mistletoe, and that's, sort of how you meet your partner, and it became one of those games that young ladies and men would play at holiday party games. Little holiday parties is like kind of the old version of spin the bottle or something like that. And you would have this, hold up a sprig of mistletoe. And I think it has a lot to do with the idea that mistletoe represented virility in ancient Rome, and then you also had the Druids holding it as something sacred. And so it became something that symbolized love and prosperity of a relationship. What's very interesting, even more interesting about mistletoe, and I actually wrote an article on this a number of years ago because I'm kind of a plant nerd, and there was this study about I'll just read a little bit from it. So it was a study from the University of Adelaide in Australia, and it showed that there was an extract from the botanical name for mistletoe is viscum. Viscum fraxini grows specifically on ash trees, and then there's other forms of viscum that grow on oak trees, but they're all kind of they're identified as the same plant family. And they did, I don't know what brought them to do this. I don't know what the back story behind the quest to find out more about the properties of mistletoe. Although I do know that in botany, often things that are, like I said, parasites or hemiparasites or fungus, they often hold a lot of chemicals and compounds in them. And so therefore they kind of can be more likely to contain something that might be of use in modern medicine. So anyway, they took this extract from this European viscum that grows on ash trees, and they actually found that it has strong anti-cancer properties. And the study actually said, quote, highly effective against colon cancer cells in cell culture, and was gentler on healthy intestinal cells compared with chemotherapy. Significantly, Viscum fraxini extract was found to be more potent against cancer cells than the chemotherapy drug. So that, to me, was kind of this amazing sort of modern study of something that people have been putting into practice. Because, of course, anytime you have the lore and the idea that some people believe that mistletoe is a plant of Venus, and therefore that's why it invokes love. But it also has been used medicinally prior to being studied, and it wasn't just about the symbolism of it. It has been used to treat stomach pains, intestinal distress, to kind of heal respiratory problems, and a number of other sort of herbal remedies for basically general health and vigor, the circulatory system. So this has been used by many cultures over, several centuries, and now it's being studied to actually have a compound that could potentially, destroy cancer cells. And this particular was colon cancer. And what I thought was interesting about that is that, it had always been used to treat intestinal disorders. So there's some amazing nerdy plant facts about the humble mistletoe. It's not just for kissing, folks. So next time you're making out with a mistletoe, think how what a miracle plant it really is in more ways than one. Not only did you get a kiss out of the deal, but it could actually save somebody's life. So that's pretty cool.
Not only can you get some ass, but it will save your ass.
You know what? I think we need to talk to the mistletoe board. We need to rebrand them. That's going to be their new slogan.
Oh, we got to make sure I get my name on that damn place so I get the revenues from that shit.
That's Rodney's clip note.
Get you some ass and save your ass. Mistletoe.
Oh, Oh, I just was rereading this article that I wrote, and that there was also another study that says that the National Center for Biotechnology Information in the U.S. National Library of Medicine actually there was an article that they published that shows photographs of a tumor virtually disappearing after 6 months of treatment with this Fraxini extract. So that's what must have led the university in Australia to do further studies on it. That's pretty cool. See, I wrote it so long ago, I didn't even remember how cool it is.
Dang.
My next question is, can you tell us about the Holly King and the Oak King?
Yeah, well, it's interesting because whenever I think of, there are certain plants we think of around Christmas time, and we associate like ivy, mistletoe, and holly is one of them. And one of the reasons that holly was so revered and is so associated with this time of year is that this is often a time of year when not much is green. Many things are brown, or they're frozen, they're covered in snow, or the leaves have fallen. And so you have what is evergreen. We have our evergreen trees, our fir trees, our pine trees, and then we have holly, the beautiful holly bush, which, it's difficult to kill those things. And not only does holly have these shiny, beautiful leaves, but it also has berries. So that's pretty cool because now you've got red and green, and you've got red and green, sort of shining out in a sea of, say, white snow. But holly has always been associated with, especially early paganism and in Celtic mythology, holly is a highly revered plant. It also has many, many medicinal properties. But there's an idea that that holly is sort of associated with something that you might know as the Green Man. You have probably seen depictions or perhaps even received a Christmas card with the Green Man on it. It's usually like the face of a sort of a leaf-faced fellow. Sometimes he's depicted as being in shrubbery. Sometimes he's in a trunk of a tree, but often there's holly involved in his in the illustrations of him. There'll be a few holly berries. So I think really the Holly King is sort of the one that I'm more familiar with, just because of the nature of holly itself. So there is this idea that there were, and again, we kind of keep dipping in and out of the fact that something like this, the Holly King, is associated with the Green Man, or a sort of Father Time / old school bearded fellow that is Odin-like guy that was worshipped around this time, that was thought to protect people from the cold of winter, to bring winter, and also have the ability to take it away. Now, my understanding of the Holly King versus the Oak King is that it's sort of a more modern, sort of neo-pagan version of a battle of, light versus dark, which was a very common celebration at this time of year. And it kind of goes back to even, like I mentioned, Krampus earlier. And Krampus is this, like, beastly goat creature who, while St. Nicholas is, said to reward children, Krampus is said to steal children, throw them in his knapsack, beat them with switches, and basically, punish them for not behaving. In more modern times, like the 17th and 18th and 19th century, that was because children weren't saying their prayers at night time. He was sort of more of the dark side, the pagan god that did battle. And so the Oak King, of course, the oak has lost its leaves, and so kind of the legend or the story is behind, it's basically between summer and winter. And you have the two solstices. You have the winter solstice and you have the summer solstice, and you would have the idea that there are these two kings and they're battling each other out for who's going to rule the seasons. And the Holly King rules winter, and so the shoulder seasons of that. And the Oak King rules summer and the shoulder seasons of that. So sort of like the fall and the summer and part of the spring. And then, in other words, the wheel of the year is divided by these two kings who represent the duality of nature and the duality of, us and our own sort of battles. It actually totally ties in with the thoughts of, suicide and loneliness, that there's this constant duality, and we are trying so hard to burn that candle brightly to shine away that darkness, that we are not always paying homage to that darkness enough to recognize that it is sort of a normal part of, you see it in nature, you see it in your own self, and, there's nothing wrong with having those two sides. There are some more common legends, or I would say more modern legends that, like I said, they're sort of neo-pagan, and these are stories like that some of the magical scholars, especially of the late Victorian and early Edwardian era, the women of the Golden Dawn, the time when Fraser wrote The Golden Bough, these were times when they were studying a lot of the pagan traditions and sort of retelling them and then forming magical rituals based on them. And I believe that it was actually George Fraser who brought that idea of the Holly King and the Oak King into sort of the more modern pagan and witchy lexicon that we might be familiar of today.
Okay, cool. Well, when did Christmas caroling start and why?
Yeah, good question. The why is really the most important.
Yeah, why?
Why are you doing this? Well, I think that the Christmas Carol, I mean, that definitely is a Christian tradition, that the idea of singing in church and, practicing these songs that are stories. I have a couple theories about that. Now, I think people have always sung at rituals. I think people have always, anytime there's been revelry and celebration, there have been songs. But songs exist, and especially in carol form and, in pre-Christian times, songs, and still to this day, songs are stories. They are telling a story. They are, telling a tale. And they're telling it in a pretty way that, is enjoyable to listen to over, a cup of, Glühwein or whatever. But they're also a way for children to remember the story and memorize the story and connect with the story. And there's something that happens with people and song. When you are singing, when you are participating in that, you are elevating your spirit. You are totally connecting with some kind of unseen thing. And, anyone who's ever, really performed or written a song or even just played an instrument can attest to that sort of trance that you can go into. So I think song as a marker of ritual and trance, that goes with any ceremony and any kind of significance. But I think that sort of the modern Christmas carol that we think of, singing about angels and 12 Days of Christmas and all that kind of stuff, that really came about when Christianity really started to like take hold, and the nativity scene and the idea that this was, you know, the birth of Jesus, and we were going to retell the story of, you know, the three kings and all these kind of things. That's really when I feel like a lot of those carols and cantors and songs really took hold that we still, you know, sing versions of today. So, you know, that's probably long ago, 13th century or so. I think they probably became regular practice associated with, you know, with the Christmas holiday.
Okay. Well, did people in the past tell ghost stories during Christmas, and if so, why?
Oh, yes. Oh, yes. This is the most unknown part of Christmas, I think, that there is, as the sort of that ghostly Halloween-y element. Now, we all can think of some very famous ghosts that we know of during Christmas time. You think of the Christmas Carol, and you have Charles Dickens' tale of, you know, the Ebenezer Scrooge and the ghost of Jacob Marley and the ghost of Christmas Past and Christmas Future, and him basically being haunted. Well, Charles Dickens wrote a lot of Christmas stories, but he actually wrote a lot of Christmas ghost stories. And he used to put out a publication. It was called All Year Round, where he served as editor and publisher. And, of course, he also wrote and contributed. And it was a journal that he put out all year round, as the name implies. And he always did a Christmas edition, sort of a little, you know, Christmas pamphlet. And he would call it different. It was usually just called the Christmas edition. Well, he in the late 1800s, he put out this wonderful piece that I've written about quite a bit, and it fascinated me because I recognized elements of the Christmas Carol in it, and yet I really had it's never in any of the collections of Dickens stories. I just found an entire book just of Dickens Christmas stories, and I got so excited because I thought, oh, I'm finally gonna find this book in a collection, or this story in a collection, and it's not there. It's very hard to find. And it's this wonderful story, basically, where Dickens writes from the point of view of a man who is going to let a house over Christmas Eve, or on Christmas Eve over the 12 days of Christmas, and he is going to invite all of his friends to come and stay in this house. And it's a rather nice house, but it's supposed to be haunted. And during the 12 days of Christmas and the 12 nights of Christmas, they will all spend in this house. They will make their observations, and unless somebody's under duress, they will not share any of the observations or experiences that they've had until the 12th night, in which they will all sit together and they will share these stories. And what Dickens did is he got all of these people that he had loved over the years, and that he had worked with, and, you know, that he was frequently publishing, and he got them to write their own chapter to this story. He assigned them each a room in the house. So, you know, he assigned somebody to be the ghost in the clock room, and you're going to be in the parlor, and you're going to be in the attic. And he sort of signed all these people up to write from the point of view of the character, and then he did the job of weaving it together. So there's a story within a story here, because you have Dickens doing this kind of cool editorial work / writing prompt / literary project. And then you have also this idea that people are kind of channeling these ghosts. But what really made me fall in love with this collection is the way that he talks about the 12 nights of Christmas, kind of like delve even further, but because he makes reference to the supernatural nature of the 12 nights of Christmas. And 12 nights of Christmas are basically like Christmas through early January, you know, whatever that 12th night ends up being. Some people say the 12 nights start on the 24th. Other people, midnight on the 24th. Other people count it, a couple of the days prior to Christmas, or solstice to, 12 days later. But nonetheless, it's around this time, and traditionally when people say the 12 days or the 12 nights of Christmas, they mean, Christmas on. And so it is supposed to be that, as with Halloween, it is another time when the veil is incredibly thin between worlds. The veil between the world of the living and the dead is so thin it almost doesn't exist. And therefore, it's highly likely that you will have a supernatural experience on this time. And some scholars have actually speculated that this is where the origins of the Christ story may have come from, that somebody had the epiphany on a, cold and dark night when the veil was so thin, and that was their interpretation of this, experience that they had with the spirit. But nonetheless, so Dickens is talking about how all these things happen that sort of indicate that it's a very, very magical time of year, and that some people, we might make wishes at New Year's, and we make this sort of Christmas wish or things like that. But it was also a time of being able to ask for those things and to do high magic, because it was like you could just reach right through to the other side. And because of that, I sort of went further and found more information about the 12 Nights of Christmas and accounts of people saying that, this was a time that wells stopped. If you were out at midnight on Christmas Eve as you were going into Christmas Day, if you were out during that time, you would be able to hear animals speak. You would be able to understand the animals in your barn as you, stumbled by. You would, if you were to draw a drink from the well at midnight on Christmas Eve, it would be red blood and not water at all. So there are these a number of accounts of, in particular, Rush and that stroke of midnight on Christmas Eve as being this highly, highly magical time, and a very, very supernatural time. And you will find, without too much digging, that Dickens knew this very well. So it's interesting because he was, always writing Christmassy things, but he had quite a penchant for ghosts, and I don't know that he believed heavily in the supernatural, like in the sense that, say, I do, but I think that he was a creative mind and open to possibilities and had seen many things and wasn't necessarily a skeptic when it came to those kinds of things. Plus, he knew that, and knows that, or as we know, that, the ghost is probably, the best literary device at any writer's fingertips, because a haunted house, a ghost, any kind of paranormal aspect, it sort of unleashes the perimeter that you might have trying to write about reality, and it can shift the story into basically a whole other direction and another world of possibilities. So Dickens also knew that the ghost as a literary device was, invaluable. So in short, yes, I think people, Christmas time.
Well, what can you tell us about the World War I Christmas Day 1914 ceasefire?
Absolutely nothing. I can tell you nothing about that.
I love your honesty.
On Christmas Day, you want to talk about weird beasties and creatures romping through the woods, I'm your lady. But Christmas Day, the history of war, I kind of sped read through that section. It was on Christmas Day, and there was a ceasefire. I mean, I've heard of it, but I don't really know much about it. I mean, I don't really know probably more than, the basics. What do you know about it? Do you know anything? I feel like you do.
He does.
I love it when I ask you or other people a question, and they're like, I don't know what the hell you're talking about. And they're like, how about you? What do you know about it? Well, there was a ceasefire in 1914, and it was British troops and German troops, and that's when they were doing the ditches where they had their bunkers, and apparently they started to play soccer with each other and trading photos with each other and drinking and having a good time, and this went on. This started to go all down the front line, and it lasted for like a week. And it took the British and the Germans generals to really forcefully say, "Hey, you got to start killing each other again." And it was a happy but sad time.
Because they were caroling too, weren't they?
Yeah, they were caroling. They were, like I said, playing, eating, sharing cigarettes, sharing food. I mean, it was a brotherhood.
They were taking pictures together.
They was just having a great time. And then they had to go back to killing each other. That's the reason why it's such a famous moment, and a sad moment, that here you befriended your enemy, and then you had to start being enemies again.
With this common ground.
Mm-hmm. And so, they kind of call it, I've heard it even called a Christmas Day miracle, but so being on that, but that would be terrible to befriend somebody and then you have to go a few days later and start shooting at them and trying to kill them again.
I don't know how they did it.
I don't either. I don't see how they did it. Okay, well, maybe you know this one.
I don't know. My success rate is pretty low tonight, so.
That was a smart ass way of saying that, wasn't it?
Yes,
I apologize. I didn't mean for it to come out that way. Fuck you, I ain't coming back on your show no more, damn it.
Yeah, instead of sending me these questions in advance.
I've had to do it to some guests. I mean, I may have to. That's no problem.
Oh, no.
Well,
far more entertaining this way.
Yeah, that's true. I do love the gotcha questions. Motherfucker, I do it.
Just don't ask me any more war questions.
Yeah, don't ask more. Okay. Do you know when Christmas came to America?
Yes, I do actually. we kind of touched on that. So yes, woo! Christmas origins. Back to the basics. Well, Christmas, again, we had, people from a lot of different backgrounds immigrating to the United States. So you have people from Germany, from Ireland, from England, from all around the world. But especially during that time, you had a lot of Europeans coming to the United States, and all of them, this is probably the early 1800s to the early 1900s. Throughout that entire century, you had a huge influx of immigrants, and they all brought different foods and music and language and culture, but everybody had a sort of a version of Santa Claus or some kind of Christmas tradition. But again, we have basically in the 19th century, probably like the mid-1800s, that's when we started having the American version. So we had all of these different cultures and everybody kind of celebrating, but we needed something to sort of unify us from, Santa Claus or Father Christmas or Saint Nick or all the different kind of Yule and Odin and all the different ideas that were behind Christmas. And that's when we sort of started self-culling and curating and accepting a more, a version of Santa Claus that had elements from all of these different cultures, but that was uniquely our own, sort of American or, North American Santa. And that really kind of came about. There was I had mentioned earlier, Thomas Nast was a cartoonist, and he drew all of these now very well-known images of Santa, and that was Santa with the beard and the kind of pointy mustache and the big belly and his pipe and all the things that sort of went along with the Night Before Christmas poem, or the sort of the famous right jolly old elf. So that, I think that one came out in like the early 1800s. So I think Christmas was here in different variations, but it was really in the Victorian era when Santa and Christmas, in sort of the more American Christmas, came up, really started to take on. He has elements of Scandinavian traditions. We have all of these things sort of mixed together. The lights on the tree, the Christmas crackers, and all kinds of things that have fallen out of popularity a little bit. But there's all of these sort of elements from different cultures that were here that together created this Santa that we accept as our patron saint of Christmas time now. And everybody wanted to claim it, and everybody had like a little piece of it, right? It was like, no, this is a Christian holiday. Actually, no, this is we invented this because we celebrate Odin, Germans, or the Dutch said, well, we have Sinterklaas, and this is what he does. And so, together all of these things became, and that's why, all families still to this day have their own particular traditions that they do at Christmas time. Some people put a Christmas pickle on their tree. Other people always bake a certain kind of cookie. Some people open all their presents on Christmas Eve. Some people don't exchange presents. I mean, one thing we have in America is the sense of freedom and identity, right? So we do us. You do you. You do your Christmas. We're going to do our Christmas. And that's how we became unified, was what this idea that, yes, it's Christmas time. Okay, we can all agree that there's some magical element to it. There's an elf sky. There's presents. There's trees. And we'll merge these, and we can all agree that this is Christmas time.
Awesome. Well, why do we hang stockings, and where did that tradition start or come from?
Well, it's interesting because I have a very good friend who grew up in Germany, and she always puts out shoes. To this day, that's what she and her son do. And she said what she always did growing up was that you shined your shoes really nicely, really cleanly, and you set them outside your door or by the front door. And when you woke up in the morning, you would find little gifts inside your shoe, just as, we associate with stocking. I think back in the day, people literally hung their stockings up to dry out in the winter. I think actually stockings hung on the hearth comes from the idea that, you've been out, it's mushy, and now you've got these socks that you've got to dry out. But once upon a time, it wasn't always stockings. It might be another little bag or some, like we said, a shoe or a little basket or something like that you would put out. But or a boot, whatever kind of thing. In time, it became much more common that you would just use what you had, and that was a sock. Everybody had a sock. It was very common. Very few people didn't have a sock, and so instead of having to sew or craft a special bag or put something up we're talking about a time when you had very little clothing. You didn't have a lot of stuff, and so you might have a little purse that you're using that. So children just started hanging their stockings up, and like, oh, perfect, we'll put this in. Instead of the shoes, we'll hang these stockings up. And then eventually, instead of it being your actual sock, it became the tradition to hang a stocking, and special stockings were made just for that, and you would put, little decorations on it, so whose is whose, and all kinds of ways of personalizing our stockings. But really, essentially, it was just a way to gather the offering that Saint Nick or Santa Claus or Santa Claus, whoever was coming to visit, would actually leave in your stocking, in your shoe, or your little plate, or whatever you had.
Okay. When did the Christmas card tradition start?
I don't have a lot of facts to back this up.
Mm-hmm.
But I think that the Christmas card tradition became popularized during World War I. Not to talk about war again, but I started it. But sending a note to people at Christmas time was something that, it wasn't something that everybody did. You didn't send out a card. You might send out like a letter, or you might send a small gift or something like that. But where you were actually sending a card to every single person on your list, and, writing a letter about what your family's done. Really, I think that came from a time when soldiers were so far away that it became popular to, buy a Christmas card and send it and leave your tidings and things like that. I think Christmas cards fall under the category of sort of little offerings and wishes. I think that people always would write down good wishes and good health to their neighbors, to their loved ones, and whether those were, tied up and put on a tree, or they were passed on by hand. There's a lot of ways that can be expressed in the sort of the written form. But you have to remember also that, prior to World War I, it was not as common for people to be literate and be able to read and write, and to send, so sending letters and sending cards wasn't an expected thing like it is today. So, a lot of people weren't able to attend school to be able to read or write. So, people were working in fields and working the land. And so I feel like that became more of a tradition after it became such a way to mark the importance of, somebody thinking of me from far away, just as you might send a postcard occasionally. And really, once people started traveling by steamer, ship, and then eventually by train, it became more common to send notes and send postcards. People have always been writing letters, but I think the card as we know it today, where you're sending, your wishes to every loved one that you aren't going to see, I feel like I don't even remember getting Christmas cards when I was a kid. I mean, you got a couple, but it wasn't like everybody sent everybody cards the way it is today, where, it's all of a sudden there's this pressure to get your cards out before, the deadline. So I think it's just sort of evolved over time to become this expected part of Christmas. But I do think it kind of has its origins in the idea that you would wish upon this Yule tree and wish for, good health and wealth and all the things that you would want your loved ones and family to have.
That makes sense. Well, we're probably going to go over. Are you cool with that? I mean, can you stay a little longer? Because the next questions I have are going to be more towards, some deeper, darker stuff about Christmas. And if you can stay, that'd be great. I know everybody.
Like, finally.
Well, I had to build. I didn't mean. I was trying to build it up, but it went a little longer than I thought. But that's fine. And if you don't mind staying for a little bit longer, granted, in 20 minutes everybody ain't gonna be able to hear it. Y'all can hear it when I put it up on our YouTube channel Within the Chaos. Just check it out if she's willing to stay for the rest of the good stuff, and y'all want to hear the stuff that's really going to piss people off. I mean, if you're cool with that.
Oh, I'm cool with that. I'm cool with pissing people off.
All right. All right. Okay. Well,
all right, here we go.
Here we go. Now, where Constantine was fighting with the Christians and the pagans about the celebrations of Christmas, can you explain how he was able to merge the two and it actually end up forming the Roman Catholic Church?
Yeah. I don't know if I can really explain that. I mean, I don't really know much more than the idea that, he was able to, I mean, from my understanding, he was able to take a pagan belief system and superimpose a Christian belief system on top of it and sort of basically create a whole new system. So I think that, I mean, we like to talk about the conversion of pagans to Christianity and how, they accepted these new ways or were forced to accept, but I think that we have to remember that there are little bits of paganism that always slips through because the people are the ones who are practicing these things. And that's why we have, flying reindeer and a magical elf and, a fire in our hearth. These are all things that slipped through in spite of the best efforts of the Christians to make us think that it's about the baby Jesus. But I think that Constantine, so he was third century I think he was the 3rd century, like the 200s, right? So he's like early Roman conquering times. And at that time, there were still a lot of pagan festivals and rituals. We talked earlier about Saturnalia, which was like this, raucous celebration of the god of agriculture in which, total cavorting in the streets and, guzzling wine dripping down your body and basically stumbling about. I mean, you can imagine, here's this person who's trying to be pious and change the fate of the people, and they're just seeing this total mayhem and chaos. And so I think that it was really that Saturnalia which was traditionally held on December 17th, and this idea that, Christmas began because Christ was born on December 25th, the merging of those two things. I mean, it was a combination of putting being practice out there, actually just spreading the word, forcing people, and merging calendars. So you had the old calendar and then the new kind of way of keeping track of the days, and basically they just sort of put their holiday on that calendar, and then that became the calendar that everybody was following, and that was the Christian calendar. So, I mean, that's about all I know about it. It's just the connection between Saturnalia and the time in which he was, heavily lobbying to convert everybody to Christianity and the belief in Christianity, and he sort of saw that opportunity of trying to eradicate this very raucous holiday and make it something more pious. And of course, throw in a virgin. You want something to be pious, throw a virgin into the story, and then everybody feels guilty instantly. It's just like, bam, all right, now I feel guilty because I was totally, feeling some guy up around the corner or whatever, and I know I'm supposed to be, pious in church. So, yeah, I mean, I don't know a lot about the actual the calendar that Constantine was so instrumental in sort of, implementing. I don't know that much about it. I just sort of know the overlap of the Roman holiday and then this the Roman Catholic Christian holiday that became so popular. And the other thing I do know is they did the same things like Easter time. So you have they basically that whole resurrection story, and the just how spring, basically that whole Easter Christ, whatever the story is, he comes out of the tomb, comes back from the dead and stuff. I mean, that is
whatever the fuck. I'm sorry, that was like, the whole, you're coming out of the hole shit,
You're talking about rolls of rock.
on the rock shit,
coming out of the hole, zombie, rock, I don't know what happened.
Yeah,
but
zombie,
but they did the same thing because that was like the fertility festival, right? That was like Oestra, Easter, like that was the time of celebrating spring and new life. And the fertility gods and goddesses were worshipped heavily, and love was being made. I mean, that was like, it is spring, it's not cold, this is when, a lot of babies were born because, hey, count back 9 months, So they did the same thing. They said, well, okay, this is far too heathen. There's far too much cavorting. There's far too much drinking and making merry and making offerings to all of these like many-headed gods. So what this really is this is something you need to think about, the sacrifice that this guy got nailed to a cross, and you got to think about his sacrifice. Well, what a buzzkill. You just totally spoiled our fertility festival. So we might as well just go to this thing at the church and light some candles and feel bad about ourselves some more.
Okay, my question is, what is soul? I said it earlier.
I know you did.
I'm having a brain fart. Leviticus?
Yeah. You might have to say that again.
Oh, what is soul in Leviticus?
Soul in Leviticus?
Mm-hmm.
Soul in Leviticus.
You can look it up. Because when I was looking at it, they threw it at me. I was like, "What the hell is this?"
I think, well, I mean, it sounds like it's Latin, but I believe that Sol Invictus was actually another. I mean, that was like the term for the god of the sun, right? That was also a Roman god. Okay, so that's what I know. Sol Invictus was sun god. You know, we had sun gods, we had moon gods. I do think there was, that again, we have that duality of the light and the dark. You see that as we talked about with the Holly King, or the, god of winter and the goddess of spring, or whatever kind of duality that we have in nature. We see that very frequently, especially the Romans are totally into the sun and the moon. and then the stars and the planets and the gods all having their own roles and representing different aspects of humanity.
Oh, well, are people that celebrate Christmas blasphemers?
Well, doesn't that just depend on how you celebrate? I mean, if you celebrate sitting around talking about a bunch of pagans, drinking wine, shooting the shit with your friends, then yeah, you're a total blasphemer. I'm in good company.
I love those people.
But, I mean, lots of people actually, go to church and stuff, so I think I guess that kind of goes back to your question about, the war on Christmas. If there's a war on Christmas, I don't even want to know about it, It's just come on. Just let us have our relaxing holiday, and we'll get around to whether or not we're moral some other time. It's in the new year. Well, that's why we make resolutions. That's when we have to address our moral compass. Now is not the time. Now is the time for gluttony.
I love this woman. I tell you, she, like I said, she's gonna be on the show.
May not know about war, but
but you damn sure know about blasphemers. So,
I've been called worse.
Well, if are Christians that celebrate Christmas, are they actually celebrating the Antichrist?
Wouldn't that be ironic? That's the war on Christmas right there, buddy. We just started it. In a way, yes. If you were really to think about all of the origins of Christmas and the pagan roots and the wild hunt and the horned god and the Yule fire burning in the countryside while revelers dance about, and the way that these things have evolved into sort of the Christmas holiday. But I do think that there are people who celebrate sort of a more conventional Christmas, and then there are people who celebrate a more something more aligned with Christianity, and they may have aspects of this conventional Christmas in there, but for them, Christmas is going to church on, Christmas Eve, and it is not necessarily about, so there are modern Christians who are not, mass consumers and are, really trying to do the right and good thing. So I don't think that they are, I guess it's kind of all about how you're celebrating it, but any aspect of a holiday like this, you cannot just turn a blind eye to the actual, historic record and the origin of things as they have evolved. And you can overlook the mass coincidence and well, I don't really think that that's true. I think that, Christianity was the right way, and they just taught the pagans the right way. They didn't know the right way. But there are just so many aspects of of these old sort of heathen ways that are part of our Christmas tradition today that, plus also, can I just say, I think the elf on the shelf is pure evil. Okay. I think people will agree with me when I say the elf on the shelf is pure evil. That thing is like a Chucky doll in an elf costume.
Well, do you think it's wrong for Christians to celebrate Christmas, and the birth of Jesus, seeing that in the Bible that God is against any celebrations and traditions?
Well, again, I haven't really read the Bible, so I'm a pure heathen at heart. I don't. As much as I joke about it, I don't really care. If I don't mind if people have their own traditions and their own way of celebrating. I think we're all hypocrites. So I don't really think that, Christians are alone in that category by any means. And I don't think, I'm not a wet blanket. I don't think there's anything, quite frankly, I was raised to believe that any excuse to celebrate is a good reason to celebrate. And that is how we got through, the christening of our cousins and the long Catholic weddings and funerals. And, we weren't practicing Catholics. My mother was raised a Catholic, but we had family members and friends, of course. And what do? You just don't go to any of those things because your skin burns when you walk inside? No, you look at it with the perspective that it's a celebration and it's not really your business to tell people how to believe. Unless you're on a late night radio show, and then you can tell them exactly how to believe. But I think, so I don't really say, oh, well, because you're buying your kids Christmas presents, then you're not a true Christian. I don't subscribe to that at all, and I would never want to crush somebody's, special holiday and whatever their own tradition is. Just as I wouldn't want anyone to do that to me. And, that's the principle that got all the witches burned right there, was trying to crush and squelch something that you didn't agree with. And while I might not agree with a lot of things that people, politically and religiously and morally, I might not agree with them, but I do agree with their right to practice and do it as they see fit and, raise their children as they see fit. And I don't, I'm not there to light the torch on underneath their pyre, it's really their own deal. And they're the ones who are going to, within reason, obviously, I anyone who's causing deliberate harm or, basically is a racist asshole, then I think, sure, they deserve a little what for, but I, I don't really believe that I can tell somebody that, you go to church, so you shouldn't have presents. To me, those are not, those are two totally different things.
Well, I guess, I'm a pagan, as we talked about it before. And what really blows my mind is that even in their Bible, I have read the Bible. In Jeremiah, it actually says, do not go into the forest and cut down a tree and adore it with silver and gold decoration, for it is an idol, and no idol comes before me.
Oh,
but yet they still,
because it's a pagan idol.
But yet they still do it, and then they want to stick their nose up at us like we're doing something wrong. It just blows my mind.
Well, and that's funny because that sort of writing, and you see this a lot with the collection of folklore in general, is that you see it. So even somebody who might think that they're collecting and writing down these stories that they've heard in oral traditions, there's always this sort of, especially with a lot of the stuff that was sort of recorded from the mid 1700s to the now I know that obviously the Bible was earlier than that, but in mid 1700s to the mid 1800s, you had quite a rash of the sort of scholarly types who could read and could write and were writers, and they were traveling around Europe and the North countries and the UK, and they were collecting these stories, Ireland and Scotland, and they're collecting these stories, but every bit of it is tinged with their own point of view, their own perspective, their own upbringing and their own belief system. And actually, you had a lot of men of the cloth, a lot of reverends, a lot of priests who did a lot of the recording because they were also culturally minded. A call to serve may also mean that you have a penchant for understanding people and understanding cultures and the human mind and the human condition. And so often you would have these recordings that were really, really excellent, and then there'd be something thrown in about, just some completely biased point of view. And so you have a lot of things written in a basis of fear, in a basis of, from my, window of my apartment, I could see the pagans having this ritual, and I saw ferocious beasts dancing and cavorting around the fire with loose women. And, really it was a harvest celebration, and the women were representing the fertility or whatever it was. It was misinterpreted, and it was misinterpreted and recorded with a basis of fear. And I think that is, that example that you quoted, that is an excellent example of fear-based teaching, because that was a pagan ritual to, decorate a tree and dance around a tree and give thanks to the one green thing that in a barren wasteland. And this was, part of a very nature-based kind of tradition. And to say absolutely don't do it because you're betraying me, that is writing out of just fear-based and no understanding of what the actual meaning and the good behind the ritual is. So I think we find that a lot, especially in the folklore that I have researched and read a lot of. You see it again and again, and there's this almost idea that the peasants and the poor people are the superstitious ones who have these sort of, lowbrow beliefs. But I can write and I can read, and I've studied, the Bible and all of these kinds of things. And so even with the best intentions, these sort of this kind of snobbery comes out.
Well, what does Beelzebub? What did you say? I missed that too. What?
I said jerks.
Oh. Yeah, that's what I'd go with. What does Beelzebub have to do with Christmas?
Well, let's talk a little bit about Krampus again, because I feel like we just kind of scratched the surface of Krampus, and then we can get into, the devil and his role in Christmas time, because I think that you have a lot of depictions of women being stolen away by devils at Christmas time. There were a lot of Victorian postcards that depicted this, and in Germany especially, where Krampus was popular, and the German Christmas traditions and what was popular in Victorian England, there was a lot of overlap there. There were a lot of shared traditions and traditions borrowed from parts of Europe, but especially Germany. But not Krampus. The English never borrowed Krampus. And Krampus, just to paint the picture, basically imagine a very hairy, horned beast with a, gnarly, devilly face and, cloven hooves and basically usually dark brown or sometimes reddish fur, and essentially just looking like a giant goat on goat man sort of thing that's tromping through the town and stealing the children. worst case scenario. Krampus is around the world. Now, Krampus is kind of the most famous of these types of creatures, of these rather devilly, pagany, Pan-like creatures, usually somewhat goat, sometimes more bear-like, sometimes more wolf-like. And again, these were skins and outfits and costumes that were donned for rituals during the winter solstice. And it was a way of connecting with nature. It was a way of warding off evil spirits. It was a way of protecting people. And so you have these things that look essentially, as we kind of think of this goat-footed god, modern devil, and they are associated with this time of year. And I think that that is how it came to be, that this is a time of year that we also wrestle with the devil and we wrestle with Satan, because literally we were wrestling with these strange but necessary evils, the darkness to the light. You even sometimes had at the same time, like peer around. It was essentially the counterpart to St. Nick. And you had St. Nicholas Day was like December 6th, and Krampusnacht was December 5th. So you kind of had like the night of revelry and fear, and then you had the night of punishment, and then you had the night of like joy and protection and benevolence. So I think that it became, kind of natural that then if you're trying to oust these rituals, that you're going to try and oust the devil and oust this sort of evil pagan being, which is essentially just called the devil. I mean, and the devil became literally the scapegoat. And there's a reason we use that term scapegoat, because we were blaming everything on the goat-footed god, which was a very important deity to many, many pagan peoples in different forms. Some kind of horned god that was represented by a beast. So I think that there was a natural association because of the sort of tradition of the solstice that the devil was also associated with, and then therefore Jesus is the one driving the devil out. And that's yet another reason why you should thank Jesus at Christmas time.
Okay. Well, do you think that, because when I was researching for, some questions for this, there's a couple guys I watched on YouTube. I mean, they were pissed about pagans and Christians about how they worship or celebrate Christmas, and they were saying something that was really interesting. They said, and I'll see your opinion about this, that Satan infiltrated Christianity with Christmas, and that Christmas is a satanic ritual. What do you think about what they were saying?
Wow.
Because I was just like, wow. Me too. I was like, damn, boys.
That is madness. That's just madness. I mean, that is just, if that's the case, great, yay. But that just seems like such an extreme way of, in other words, the reason that we don't just celebrate a pure Christmas that is all about the baby Jesus is because of the devil. Is that it? And the devil is, to them a real figure, but to us, I mean, if you want to look at it, there is a devil at Christmas time, and it's that devil of consumerism and the devil of money. If you're not having enough, and the have and have nots, and then making people feel less than because they don't have as much, and feel bad because they don't have as much. I mean, there's a devil there. That's a different kind of a devil. But I guess I can kind of see that point of view a bit in those regards.
Well, the way these two guys were describing how they felt about it, I mean, they was hard on the Christians about it, saying that they were wrong for celebrating Christmas, that it's in the Bible you don't supposed to celebrate Jesus' birthday. You don't even say it in the Bible, and that all, with the tree and the decorations and all that, it's all heathens, and it's all a satanic ritual that has got them all blinded, and even the preachers and churches and everything throughout the world are all being blinded by this, by them even celebrating Christmas and having Christmas trees up and so forth in their churches. And I was like, damn. it floored me. That's the reason why I was wondering your opinion about it.
Well, I find that exciting. We're winning.
Yeah. Even though Christians are helping you win too.
Yeah.
I mean,
forgive them, for they know not what they do.
Well, and see that comes down to the last two questions I have for you, and it was based off what these guys were saying. They were saying that Christmas is a demonic custom, and that Christmas is a deception. And what's your opinion on that? And I'll let you go.
Yeah. Well, I mean, again, it's an extreme point of view, but when I, not having read or engaged at all with the people whose discussion this is, I think I can see a bit of that point. I can see that, what we celebrate today as Christmas is pride from what Christians say Christmas is based on, but also what pagans say Christmas is based on. And we're talking about the majority of people and the celebration of Christmas with the tree and the presents and all those kinds of things. I would just flip that and say, rather than it being some sort of conspiracy and infiltration, I think you have to look at it as an evolution and a way of, the times, the taking one ritual and mixing it with another and then superimposing that on top of another ritual. I don't think there's any one right way, because there's so many ways that came to be. There's so many different tidbits and ideas that overlap, and that's sort of the beauty of a holiday like this, or any sort of, when you get into the darker side of the kingdom of the fairy, you will find that there are the same names or are different names for the same creature. You will find a description that is so similar, but it's from a completely different part of the world. And I think that that's kind of the beauty of important holiday. I mean, it's important enough that everybody's trying to claim it. So it's obviously a time that we need mentally, culturally, physically, we need some kind of celebration. We need something to hold on to. Now, I don't know about where you live, but here the winters are long and the winters are cold. And the spring is a long time coming. And so you need something to hold on to. And I think that is true, and that is why people celebrate things at this time of year. They celebrate when it's, a significant turn of the seasons. It's a natural rhythm that we have. So rather than saying, okay, the goat-footed god and all the trappings and trimmings are just deceiving you from what the true Christmas is, I would say that those trappings and trimmings are really representative of the evolution of the holiday itself. And, I guess they're getting coal in their stockings, because they have a really bad attitude.
Yeah, I agree with you. It was 2 hours of watching these guys. It was two different ones, and I was really surprised how they were. I mean, they were strongly, against how the Christians celebrate Christmas, and also, as they call the pagans, the heathens. And I'm like, okay, I thought that word went out for a while, but okay.
What are they? What are they? Atheists?
No,
what?
They're actually Christians, and the way they believe is, they say, both of them said that we believe every word of the Bible, and I was sitting here getting mad.
Which version, though? See, that's what I want to know. Which version of the Bible? Because the problem with the Bible, my real problem with the Bible is that we use some like fat old white king's version that was totally rewritten to suit him. Like, is that the version that you know? That was basically rewritten in order to enforce tax laws. Like, if that's the version you are going on, then, then I have a problem with that.
Mm-hmm.
That's the version that, calls all women whores.
Mm-hmm.
That's not the good version. That's not the good version, in spite of its name.
Well, do you have any, before we go, do you have anything you'd like to add that we might have
Any
missed?
parting words?
Yeah, you got any parting words to this? The floor is open. In case we missed something or didn't cover something, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, because I haven't expressed them at all tonight. On that note, I think whatever people's holiday traditions are, I hope that everybody is just happy and merry in their own way, and whatever it takes to get there. And, just to remember the evolution. I mean, you get mad and you can say, they stole this thing from the pagans, and now they're trying to steal it back from us, and all kinds of things like that. But really, I think it's just like anything, especially in the United States of America, where everything is built on something else, and an evolution of, and it may not necessarily be an evolution in the right direction, but it's an amalgamation of many different beliefs and cultures. And the best thing that you can really do is learn about other celebrations and other cultures, and learn about how your neighbors celebrate Christmas, and learn about traditions from different parts of the world, and really kind of celebrate that and embrace that, and, embrace the dark along with the light. Other than that, my website is varlaventura.net. You can buy my books just in time for Christmas, available anywhere books are sold. And I thank you both very much for another wonderful and lively discussion full of stumpers and thought-provoking questions.
Well,
some of which I'm still thinking about.
She's gonna be on, after she gets off, she's gonna be like, damn it, he made me think of this. Now I'm gonna have to go look it up.
Well, I have a question as a fellow patient. What is your magical name?
I will not say that on the air.
Okay.
I just drew a vagina.
I mean, my magical name is basically my name.
Okay.
I'm not going to announce that.
That's fine.
I'll tell you off air. I'll totally tell you off air, but I'm not going to say it on air.
Okay, well, my name is Lady Knox. I was just telling you.
Cool.
Cool. That's cool.
Well, it's great.
So what's your plans for 2019, if you have any yet, or any projects or books or anything you're writing?
Hopefully I'm going to finish a book. I'm hoping I'm going to finish a book this year. Hopefully I will at least get a good chunk of it done in the next couple of months, enough to pitch it to my publisher, and hopefully they will love it and, want to publish it. So my goal is to at least have a book in production by the end of 2019. Other than that, travel, see the world. The frustrating thing about writing books, like books about folklore or, any kind of event or creature or a topic like paranormal, is that you just never, it's such a vast subject. You never can really know it all or learn it all. And it happens to me every time. I spend years researching a topic, and then without fail, I send the manuscript into the publisher for the final round. And, that next day I learn about something completely perfect for the book that I had never heard of before. And so because I'm attracted to the topic, these topics kind of keep coming up and coming to me, but it's like an endless cycle. So my big challenge is just knowing when to say when and just call it. Usually it's not me, it's my editor saying, all right, this is it. You're done. No more adding, no more revisions. It's time to we just got to move forward. So I never quite know what my next project is going to be, and I usually have 2 or 3 ideas before I usually send in more than one idea at once, just to hedge my bets. A couple of paragraph pitches, and then I move on to something more developed. So hopefully I'll actually get something done in the next few months. What gets it done is a deadline. There's nothing like a deadline to get you to actually finish something.
That's exactly right. You sound like you're a procrastinator, like I am.
Inspired under pressure.
Oh, okay. Yeah, I like that better. Not bad. See, I'm not smart enough to think something like that. But I will remember that. Because I'm always inspired under pressure when I'm trying when I'm working, when I'm trying to work up questions for guests. I'm like, oh shit, I got to get this done.
I am inspired under pressure right now. Right here.
And I normally work best that way, except if I start getting a lot of pressure and then I start growling at people. See, we do a Christmas photo shoot every year, and at local stores, and sometimes people get on my nerves a little bit, and I start growling back at them. So they voted me to get away from doing the customer service thing and put me in a corner just burning CDs. I think that's some shit.
Hide that Scrooge. Hide that Scrooge away.
Yeah, because I got into it there a couple of weeks ago with a lady. She was fussing at me, and I was trying. They had everything all screwed up, and I was trying to get the pictures right and get them burnt to the CD, and she was just being a pain in the ass. And I told her, I said, I don't need your money. And everybody just shut down and looked at me like, what did he just say? But I'll let you go, and it has been amazing, and I hope you have a great holiday and a happy new year, and I look forward to speaking to you again sometime next year, and hopefully we can get you down here to our Fan Fest in next November.
Oh, yeah, that's right. When is that?
November 2nd.
Oh, well, that's appropriate.
Yeah. I'll send you information tonight.
Day of the Dead. Yeah, I love it. Well, thank you both so much. It's always a pleasure talking to you, and I do hope that you have a wonderful holiday season. Drink a little too much, eat a little too much, Now, do it like the Romans would have done it.
Drink too much, eat too much, and fuck all the time. Fuck too much. Merry Christmas to me. Happy holiday to me. Happy whatever the fun, whatever you want to call it. Rod is happy.
I don't care what you call it.
That's right. You call it whatever. I just call it Rod happy time. Well, you have a good night, and again, thank you so much. It's always an honor and a pleasure to have you on. It's always fun and thought provocative and also a great learning experience.
For us both, for certainly for me as well. Now I'm gonna go look up the Christmas truth.
Okay.
1914. Spent all night buffing up on my war history. Well, thank you both so much.
Okay, you have a good
Have
night.
a good night.
You too.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.
Oh, Lord, that's fun. Lord, everybody, that's great. For us to end the year out, I want to thank Varla, for coming on the show once again. We got nothing but mad respect for her. Love her to death. And I guess for next Thursday, for Thursday night, January 3rd, we're not going to be on next week because we're taking another week off for the holidays. We'll have the Connor sisters on as we normally do, our first show of the year, and we'll be celebrating our 3rd year anniversary with Within the Chaos.
Yay!
3 years. I'm surprised somebody ain't shut me down yet. So again, happy holidays, and everybody have a happy and safe New Year. Got nothing but love and respect for you all. And thank you for putting up with me. You got anything to say?
Good night, everyone.
Nothing else?
Yeah.
Oh, I don't know what you doing. Okay, let me find the end of the show. Y'all have a good one. We're going to play. That's it for us tonight. I want to thank everyone that took the time to listen in. I'd like to give a big shout out to the Vibe Radio Network and to Ryan for putting up with us. Also to all the first responders and our men and women in the armed services. Thank you for your service and the sacrifices that you and your families make every day to keep our great nation safe. Tune in next week to another exciting show starting at 10 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Everyone can go to our Facebook page Within the Chaos, and don't forget to like our page to see upcoming guests along with past shows, postings, or you can also go to my website at www.blackdiamondps.org or blogtalkradio.com/Vibe Radio Network. Also, we have a YouTube channel, so go to YouTube. Look up Within the Chaos for past shows. Thanks again. Until next week, everyone have a safe weekend and have a good night. And love you all. Be careful out there.
I'm sorry. But I don't want to be an emperor. That's not my business. I don't want to rule or conquer anyone. I should like to help everyone if possible. Jew, Gentile, black man, white. We all want to help one another. Human beings are like that. We want to live by each other's happiness, not by each other's misery. We don't want to hate and despise one another. In this world, there's room for everyone, and the good earth is rich and can provide for everyone. The way of life can be free and beautiful, but we have lost the way. Greed has poisoned men's souls, has barricaded the world with hate, has goose-stepped us into misery and bloodshed. We have developed speed, but we have shut ourselves in. Machinery that gives abundance has left us in want. Our knowledge has made us cynical, our cleverness hard and unkind. We think too much and feel too little. More than machinery, we need humanity. More than cleverness, we need kindness and gentleness. Without these qualities, life will be violent, and all will be lost. The aeroplane and the radio have brought us closer together. The very nature of these inventions cries out for the goodness in men, cries out for universal brotherhood, for the unity of us all. Even now, my voice is reaching millions throughout the world, millions of despairing men, women, and little children, victims of a system that makes men torture and imprison innocent people. To those who can hear me, I say, do not despair. The misery that is now upon us is but the passing of greed, the bitterness of men who fear the way of human progress. The hate of men will pass, and dictators die, and the power they took from the people will return to the people. And so long as men die, liberty will never perish. Soldiers, don't give yourselves to brutes, men who despise you, enslave you, who regiment your lives, tell you what to do, what to think, or what to feel, who drill you, diet you, treat you like cattle, use you as cannon fodder. Don't give yourselves to these unnatural men, machine men with machine minds and machine hearts. You are not machines, you are not cattle, you are men. You have the love of humanity in your hearts. You don't hate, only the unloved hate, the unloved and the unnatural. Soldiers, don't fight for slavery, fight for liberty. In the 17th chapter of St. Luke it is written, the kingdom of God is within man, not one man nor a group of men, but in all men, in you. You, the people, have the power to create machines, the power to create happiness. You, the people, have the power to make this life free and beautiful, to make this life a wonderful adventure. Then in the name of democracy, let us use that power. Let us all unite. Let us fight for a new world, a decent world, that will give men a chance to work, that will give youth a future and old age a security. By the promise of these things, brutes have risen to power, but they lie. They do not fulfill that promise. They never will. Dictators free themselves, but they enslave the people. Now let us fight to fulfill that promise. Let us fight to free the world, to do away with national barriers, to do away with greed, with hate and intolerance. Let us fight for a world of reason, a world where science and progress will lead to all men's happiness. Soldiers, in the name of democracy, let us all unite!
You're looking for meaning and purpose in your work.
Hello? Hello?
We all are. Every year, Harvard Business School Executive Education helps executives like you reevaluate goals and develop both personally and professionally to turn their careers into their callings. Don't be different. Be changed. Go. Start by going to hbs.me/go. That's hbs.me/go.